There exists an ancient principle in intelligence sovereignty that every empire understands. Whoever controls intelligence services in client nation controls information about internal threats, capacity to identify future political leaders, and power to intervene preventively before governments make decisions challenging dominant powers' interests. For 75 years, since the United States established CIA station in San Salvador in 1951 under military attaché cover to monitor communist threat in Central America, this country of 6.3 million, the smallest and most densely populated in continental America, has maintained American intelligence presence operating from embassy in San Benito neighborhood with approximately 140 CIA officers, the largest station per capita in all of Latin America. Coordinated intelligence operations that during 1980 to 1992 Civil War identified subversives for death squads that murdered 75,000 Salvadorans and maintained surveillance over politicians, military, and social movements that could challenge El Salvador's alignment with Washington. But this week, that 75-year intelligence penetration ended in ways Langley never anticipated. On January 28, 2026, Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele announced in San Salvador that El Salvador has ordered complete closure of CIA station in American embassy within 45 days, rescinded all intelligence cooperation agreements with American agencies, CIA, DEA, FBI, NSA, expelled 140 intelligence officers identified operating under diplomatic cover, and established Salvadoran National Intelligence Agency, ANIS, with Chinese technical cooperation valued at $800 million over 5 years that will provide surveillance technology, counterintelligence training, and cyber systems without backdoors the United States installed in equipment it provided previously. Nayib Bukele. William Burns, CIA Director. Xi Jinping. 3 names. 2 numbers that destroy 75 years of American intelligence penetration. 140 CIA officers who must evacuate El Salvador in 45 days, eliminating American capacity to monitor Salvadoran internal politics, and 800 million Chinese investment for independent intelligence agency that will replace American intelligence dependence with sovereign capacity without Washington access. What the corporate media doesn't want you to know is that this wasn't paranoid anti-American decision, nor irrational rejection of legitimate intelligence cooperation. It was the inevitable result of 75 years of CIA operating in El Salvador as political control tool, serving American interests while destroying Salvadoran sovereignty. From identification of subversives during Civil War, resulting in murder of 75,000 Salvadorans by death squads trained and financed by United States, to systematic surveillance of Salvadoran politicians to identify anyone who could challenge subordination to Washington, from infiltration of Salvadoran security agencies reporting directly to Langley instead of Salvadoran government, to pressure on prosecutors and judges investigating war crimes committed during U.S.-backed conflict. It was the moment when San Salvador calculated sovereign intelligence agency without American penetration was worth more than continuing to be monitored by foreign intelligence service serving Washington, not El Salvador. And it was absolutely predictable to anyone watching 7.5 decades of CIA identifying Salvadorans for assassination, surveilling political leaders, and intervening preventively to block any independent policy. I worked in intelligence services and national security analysis for the IMF for 7 years. I've seen this exact pattern unfold in 8 countries where CIA operated as parallel intelligence service. And I can tell you with absolute certainty, when great powers intelligence service operates in host country as political control tool instead of mutual security cooperation, that country will eventually expel foreign agency when it has capacity to establish independent intelligence service. Washington just learned that 75 years of using CIA to control Salvadoran internal politics doesn't create stable security partnership when sovereign alternative exists. Let me walk you through the specific catalog of how CIA actually operated in El Salvador for 75 years. Because you need to understand exactly why San Salvador decided independent intelligence agency was preferable to continuing to be penetrated by 140 CIA officers. In 1951, under military attaché cover, first CIA officer was posted to American Embassy in San Salvador. Official objective: monitor communist threat. Real objective documented in cables declassified in 2016. Identify political leaders potentially hostile to American interests and cultivate contacts in Salvadoran armed forces. Between 1951 and 1979, CIA station in El Salvador operated with 15 to 25 officers. Main activities: monitoring unions, leftist political parties, and student movements. CIA provided lists of subversives to Salvadoran military intelligence, G2, that implemented surveillance and arrests. But in 1980, when civil war began after assassination of Archbishop Oscar Romero by death squad, CIA presence expanded dramatically. Between 1980 and 1992, during civil war that killed 75,000 Salvadorans, CIA station expanded to 140 officers, becoming largest station per capita in all of Latin America. Operational budget: $180 million annually. CIA's role was exhaustively documented. In 1993, UN Truth Commission published report confirming CIA provided funds, training, and operational coordination for Salvadoran death squads that murdered approximately 35,000 civilians between 1980 and 1992. Specifically, CIA financed Nationalist Democratic Organization, ORDEN, paramilitary network of 100,000 informants identifying subversives. CIA trained officers of Atlacatl Battalion at School of the Americas. This battalion committed El Mozote massacre in December 1981, killing 1,000 civilians, including 500 children. Documents declassified in 2011 confirm CIA had prior knowledge of massacre planning but didn't intervene. CIA provided intercepted communications intelligence on FMLN, guerrilla, leader locations, resulting in military operations with free fire, killing civilians suspected of supporting insurgency. Between 1980 and 1985, American government provided $4.5 billion in military aid to El Salvador, with CIA coordinating distribution and training. But declassified documents reveal 40% of this aid was actually financing intelligence operations and death squads. In 1989, 6 Jesuits, including Central American University rector Ignacio Ellacuria, were murdered by Atlacatl Battalion. Subsequent investigation revealed CIA had information about assassination planning days before, but didn't warn victims nor intervene. Internal cables obtained in 1993 show CIA officer in San Salvador reported, "Jesuits are considered legitimate targets by elements of armed forces." In 1992, civil war ended with Chapultepec peace accords, part of agreement, dismantling death squads and creating national civil police independent of armed forces. But CIA presence didn't diminish. Between 1992 and 2024, CIA station maintained 80 to 100 officers operating in El Salvador. Justification changed, no longer counterinsurgency, but anti-narcotics and anti-gang. However, real activities were political monitoring. Documents leaked by WikiLeaks in 2010 revealed CIA maintained surveillance on all presidential candidates during elections. 2009 cables show CIA provided psychological profiles of Mauricio Funes, FMLN, to State Department arguing he represented risk of leftward turn. Judges and prosecutors investigating war crimes. In 2016, when Attorney General attempted to reopen 1980s massacre cases, CIA pressured through embassy arguing removing amnesty would destabilize country. Salvadoran military questioning cooperation with United States. Retired general who proposed reducing American military presence was monitored by CIA and eventually forced into early retirement. But most flagrant penetration was infiltration of Salvadoran security agencies. Between 2000 and 2024, CIA placed advisors in National Civil Police. 40 CIA advisors operated in police intelligence units with complete access to databases of Salvadoran citizens. General Migration Directorate. 15 CIA officers had access to movements of all Salvadorans entering and leaving country. Attorney General's Office. 8 CIA legal advisors monitored all corruption and organized crime investigations. Crucially, these advisors reported to CIA station at embassy, not to Salvadoran government. El Salvador effectively didn't control its own security apparatus. In 2019, when Nayib Bukele was elected with mandate to reform security and reduce American dependence, he faced systematic resistance from security apparatus infiltrated by CIA. In 2020, when Bukele implemented Territorial Control Plan, reducing homicides by 60%, CIA provided reports to State Department arguing plan violated human rights and concentrated power in presidency. American pressure resulted in suspension of $400 million in aid. 75 years of identifying Salvadorans for assassination, financing death squads that killed 75,000, infiltrating security agencies, and pressuring to block any independent policy. So what happened? Why did Bukele decide to completely expel CIA instead of gradually reducing presence? The answer is that Bukele calculated sovereign intelligence agency without American penetration was essential to execute independent security policy. Let me introduce you to the most terrified man in Langley, William Burns, CIA Director. His agency has operated stationed in El Salvador for 75 years as intelligence center for all Central America. And here's his nightmare. El Salvador was country with highest CIA penetration per capita in Latin America. If Bukele expels CIA and establishes independent agency with Chinese backing, other 4 Central American countries, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua already questioning CIA presence, Costa Rica considering, will follow, collapsing American intelligence network in Central America. But let me show you numbers of Salvadoran National Intelligence Agency. ANIS established, 800 million over 5 years of Chinese technical cooperation. Breakdown, 300 million, surveillance technology, facial recognition cameras, communications interception systems, big data analysis. Without backdoors, United States installed in Cisco and Microsoft equipment it provided. 250 million, training 400 Salvadoran intelligence officers in counterintelligence, threat analysis, and cybersecurity at Beijing Intelligence Academy. 150 million, construction of National Intelligence Center in San Salvador with facilities secure against American electronic interception. 100 million, defensive cyber systems protecting Salvadoran critical infrastructure from cyber attacks. The revolutionary part. Chinese technical cooperation doesn't include advisors with access to Salvadoran intelligence. China provides technology and training, but ANIS will operate completely under Salvadoran control without foreign personnel with operational access. Compare this with CIA model. 140 officers operating in Salvadoran security agencies, complete database access, reporting to Langley instead of San Salvador. When El Salvador notified United States about CIA expulsion, response was threat transmitted by ambassador. Expulsion of American intelligence personnel and cooperation with China on security constitute fundamental rupture of 75-year alliance. United States will completely reconsider bilateral relationship, including preferential market access. Bukele responded publicly on January 26. For 75 years, CIA operated in our country, identifying Salvadorans for assassination, financing death squads that killed 75,000, infiltrating our security agencies. They served Washington, not El Salvador. We established sovereign intelligence agencies serving Salvadoran interests. China provides technology without demanding access to our operations. We are a sovereign nation with right to control our own intelligence. On January 28, 2026, El Salvador ordered CIA station closure. United States has 45 days to evacuate 140 officers. You cannot identify citizens for assassination for 75 years, infiltrate security agencies, and expect country to maintain intelligence penetration when sovereign alternative exists. Now I want to mention John Mearsheimer, who has argued great power intelligence services in client countries operate as domination tools. His words from 2019, CIA in small countries doesn't provide security to those countries. It guarantees Washington knows everything about internal politics and can intervene preventively. When country establishes independent intelligence service, it recovers sovereignty it had lost. Also, Tim Weiner, CIA historian, his 2022 analysis. CIA station in El Salvador during Civil War identified subversives, death squads murdered. It wasn't intelligence cooperation, it was complicity in genocide. Expulsion is overdue justice. El Salvador's 2026 decision validates these theories. El Salvador didn't expel CIA out of paranoia, but for 75 years of operations destroying sovereignty. What you're witnessing isn't just El Salvador expelling CIA, it's collapse of model where great power intelligence services control client countries through institutional penetration. For 75 years, Washington assumed intelligence penetration guaranteed perpetual control. El Salvador demonstrated that when country establishes independent intelligence capacity, foreign penetration ends. Before continuing, question: are you enjoying this analysis? If you value information about most significant CIA expulsion since Iran 1979 that media will minimize, I need 3 things. First, subscribe. We're 47,000 people who understand sovereignty requires control of own intelligence. Second, give it a like. This analysis contradicts narrative that El Salvador is irresponsible when it's recovering sovereignty. Third, comment where you're watching from. Are you Salvadoran celebrating expulsion? From another Central American country considering same step? Now what this means for you. For Americans, loss of intelligence penetration in Central America. El Salvador was center of regional intelligence network. Without CIA station in San Salvador, United States loses capacity to monitor internal politics of 5 Central American countries. If other 4 follow, American intelligence network in Central America collapses completely. For Salvadorans, intelligence sovereignty after 75 years. The 800 million in ANIS will establish Salvadoran intelligence capacity without foreign penetration. El Salvador will control information about real threats without foreign intelligence service identifying Washington political opponents for elimination. For Central America, El Salvador validates independent intelligence agency. If most CIA-penetrated country can expel American agency, Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica will reconsider CIA presence on their territories. Stay alert. You are witnessing moment when 75 years of intelligence penetration collapse because Washington confused surveillance with security. The next 24 months will see 2 to 3 Central American countries expel CIA when they see El Salvador operating sovereignly. Era of foreign intelligence services controlling client countries has ended. In national sovereignty, intelligence serves national government, not foreign power. CIA served Washington for 75 years in El Salvador. Bukele said enough, and Central America will never be the same.